borrowing money. Oh, my goodness. You know, I thought Rahm was the financial fiduciary wizard who was going to lead us out of the desert. Hey, David Axelrod, I thought he was ready to lead from day one. Well, turns out we're going to have to borrow the $850 million to buy stuff like, let's just read the laundry list of things we're going to have to buy. $65 million for the Police and Fire Academy in West Garfield Park, $14.1 million to make Chicago Fire Department stations more accessible to women, $30 million for new headquarters for engine number 115, $41 million for police and fire vehicles, and $21 million to repair existing police and fire facilities. Wait, $171 million for the new LED streetlights, $168 million for the Aldermanic Menu Program, $24 million for bridge and viaduct improvements and shared and vaulted sidewalks, etc., and so forth. Let's face it, folks, all these expenditures, my humble opinion, seem worthwhile. It costs money to operate government, folks. If you're going to pretend it doesn't, you're going to fool yourself. Anyway, so added to the list was this little number that caught my eye. Another $155 million, that's $155 million, will be used to pay off short-term loans. What does that mean? That means we're borrowing money to pay off the money we borrowed the last time to pay off the last loans. Ah, what a financial wizard that Mayor Rahm really is. He borrowed money to pay off a loan. Also, turns out that the people we borrowed from are getting a little nervous. The rating service, it goes on to say in the story, the rating service who judge the worthiness of our debt and our financial state are nervous about lending us more money because, get this, there's going to be a new mayor. Yes, apparently they're concerned that Lori or Tony won't be the financial geniuses that Rahm is. You know, the mayor who has to borrow money to pay off the money he borrowed last time to pay off the money he borrowed the time before that. That guy is the financial genius. Anyway, I'm telling you, the rating service are saying, well, we may have to raise the interest on your loans because we have these new mayors coming in. We don't know if we can, trust them. I'm telling you, folks, those rating services are looking for any excuse, absolutely any excuse to undercut our credit rating so that it will cost us more money to borrow money. Let's be real, folks. It can't get worse than Mayor Rahm when it comes to balancing a budget. Oh, wait. Mayor Daley was worse than Mayor Rahm when it came to dealing with the financial state of the city. You know what? I fear the day will come when I will say, much like the baby boomer friends of mine do when they look back at the 60s, 70s music and say, Procol Harum, there's nothing like it. You know, Rahm wasn't a bad guy. I kind of miss Rahm. I dread that day will come. We got a great show today, everybody. Monroe Anderson will be here. Conquistador, your stallion stand. Sorry. That, of course, is not the opening song, the opening strains of Conquistador by Procol Harum, but it sure sounds like it. Anyway, great show today. Monroe Anderson will be here. Yes, indeed. Monroe Anderson, you remember her from the last show? Coming in every Monday. Monroe Monday was a staple, and we talked Trump, and Trump. And we'll be talking Trump with Monroe. Monroe Monday will return, only it's a Tuesday. It's a little confusing. Our marketing team is working right now feverishly, on a new name.
Oh, wait, yeah, that's just me. Hold on. I didn't even think of that.
Dennis is working feverishly. I got to come up with a new name for Monroe Monday because it's on a Tuesday. Adolfo Mondragon, the legendary El Dragon from the southwest side of the city of Chicago, the pride and joy of Curie High. He will be here at, around 2 o'clock to try to explain to people in the world what is going on the southwest side of Chicago, that they reelected Ed Burke, even though he'd been indicted for shaking down franchisees, owners of Burger Kings. Anyway, we'll see what they're up to. Get an explanation on the ins and outs of Chicago politics. Everybody get your paper and pencils out because he's going to take the deep dive on that. And then in 2:30, we're going to get a little environmental news with the great, the immortal, the legendary Mike Novak, who's been running a gardening show on radio for like 4,000 years. Am I correct in that?
Oh, yeah. 4,000.
Yeah, 4,000. He was there at the Garden of Eden, Mike Novak. Anyway, Mike will be in here. We're talking gardening, environment, all good things. He's going to try to help us decide which mayoral candidate to vote for based on issues pertaining to the environment. So I'm looking forward to having Mike on the show. And so it'll be politics, and more politics.
And gardening.
Yeah, you're not that much of a gardener, D. You know that, don't
really?
you?
No.
Yeah, not really into plants.
Not a green thumb, huh?
No, there's a picture of a plant, though, on the front page of the New York Times.
Oh, yeah, please. Show those listeners a newspaper again. That'll keep them around.
Anyway, Mike will be here. Mike knows a lot about... Did I tell you he knows a lot about gardening?
No.
Okay, no.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, Mike will be here 2:30. But before we do that, before we have any of that discussion, time for Dennis and the news.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's the middle of the day. Let's talk about what's going on nationally. And all the talking heads have been, well, talking their heads off about Nancy Pelosi's latest comments. And I can't say I blame them. Pelosi, in an interview with the Washington Post on Monday, in a very un-Pelosi fashion, said that Donald Trump should not be impeached unless the reasons are overwhelming and bipartisan, given how divisive it would be for the country. Here's the quote from Pelosi, quote, "I'm not for impeachment. Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country. He's just not worth it."
Yeah, I actually do not blame her. I'll be really curious what Monroe has to say about this. This is really Monroe Country talking about the impeachment of Donald John Trump.
New segment name, Monroe Country.
What? Man.
I don't know. Maybe it's... I'll think about it.
Well, there's the Monroe Doctrine. But anyway.
Oh, dang.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
brilliant.
Come on, man. I'm a marketing genius.
Oh.
But the reality is this. The Republican Party is going to stick with Trump, apparently, no matter what comes out. Like, I think his approval rating is between 80 and 90%. So there will be a huge political war. And the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, is very concerned about the swing voters. You know, like the base of the Democratic Party would love to drive Donald John Trump out with an impeachment trial to impeach him. But they're worried about, you know, those just cautious swing voters and somewhere like the stereotypical suburban voter in Maryland who's like, I don't know, it seems so unfair. He's not that bad, and can't we just all get along? That kind of person. So they're a little cautious about turning off that voter. That's what's going on. So Nancy Pelosi, she's trying to stay above the fray, everybody, and show like, you know, I'm open-minded. I don't want to alienate too many people. I just want the process of government going on. Meanwhile, those Democrats are investigating absolutely everything they can possibly investigate regarding Donald Trump. So even if they don't launch an impeachment proceeding, they're still going to dig up the dirt to help unseat him in 2020.
Look inside that slipper. Donald Trump slippers. Anything there? They're
No,
deep
Donald
diving.
Trump slippers. His bedroom slippers. That's what he's wearing when he tweets at 4 a.m.
Hey, who's got my slippies?
All right, another news nationally. Yeah, it seems as though that people are still hung up on this comment from our president.
The Democrats have become an anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party, and that's too bad. I'm going to Alabama.
And no, I'm not talking about that Alabama part.
I'm going to Alabama. That's the part. That's it. Can't talk it. No time for. I got to go to Alabama. I just said something completely irresponsible and provocative and nasty and low life, but now I got to go to Alabama.
Where the stars are so blue. Sweet home, Alabama.
Oh, Sweet Home. That's his favorite song.
Reporters were ready to hash it out at a press conference on Monday. Yeah, after President Donald Trump accused Democrats of becoming an anti-Jewish party. And Ben Joravsky, I think you'll be excited about this. When it comes to White House press conference audio, that means it's time for only one person. That's right, making her Ben Joravsky Show debut.
And so the fifth reporter, like the first four, now paid nothing. He got a 100% saving.
Let me take notes.
The sixth now paid $2 instead of $3, a 33% saving.
All right.
The seventh now paid $5 instead of $7.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, my God. That little snippet, I brought back so many memories. It's when Sarah Huckabee Sanders, spokesperson for Donald John Trump, was trying to explain how a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans somehow or other translated into a tax break for the poorest Americans. Remember that one?
Instead of $3, a 33% saving.
Oh. And she was giving that lecture to the White House press corps. They're like, First of all, they're overstimulated on coffee anyway. They could barely, bouncing off the walls. But they're trying to follow her.
Instead of 18, which was a 22% saving. And the tent now paid $49 instead of $59.
Okay.
A 16% saving.
Oh, the 16% save.
Got to remember that 16%.
Maybe
saving.
Mike Novak can help us a little bit on this one. He's been around for a while on radio. Did you know that?
Apparently 4,000 years. Whoa. All right, so it's White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. The question posed to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, nothing tough really. Does Donald Trump actually believe that Democrats hate those of the Jewish community? All right, we have some audio here at everybody taking an attempt at this question here. Here's attempt number 1. Let's play ball and let the ducking and dodging begin.
We've also seen him tweet in the last couple of days that Democrats are the, quote, anti-Jewish party. Does the president really believe Democrats hate Jews?
Look, the president's been an unwavering and committed ally to Israel and the Jewish people. And frankly, the remarks that have been made by a number of Democrats and failed to be called out by Democrat leadership is frankly abhorrent, and it's sad, and it's something that should be called by name. It shouldn't be put in a watered-down resolution. It should be done the way the Republicans did it when Steve King made terrible comments. We called it out by name. We stripped him of his committee memberships, and we'd like to see Democrats follow suit.
Ooh, strike 1.
Oh, okay. First of all, ally to the Jewish people, Donald Trump, the same Donald Trump who was too afraid to condemn Nazis marching through the streets in Virginia, that Donald Trump ally to the Jewish people, I'm afraid that doesn't fly anywhere.
So once again, the question, does our President Donald Trump actually believe that Democrats hate those of the Jewish community? Let's try round 2. Let's see if they get an answer.
But first of all, you mentioned Steve King. The president, correct me if I'm wrong, has not condemned Steve King. What he said, praising white supremacy. Has the president publicly come out and said anything
I speak on behalf of the president on a number of topics, and I've talked about that a number of times, and I'd refer you back to those comments where I used words like abhorrent and unacceptable.
Strike 2.
All right, time out. It was, by the way, we got to give that reporter credit. What a bulldog that guy, whoever he is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never heard the president himself do it. Sarah, I said it. Sarah said abhorrent. Go look at it. Yeah, but what about President Trump? Did he ever tweet out, how abhorrent it is? By the way, did Trump ever, can you imagine? I think that's too many characters for a tweet. Abhorrent. There's a lot of letters in that.
There's a lot.
Twitter heads are like, I can't fit this in the little Twitter tweet. Has President Trump ever said it? Sarah Huckabee said, you're not the president. Okay, so nobody cares what you said. We want to know what Donald John Trump said. I don't think he said anything about Stephen King because they share a constituency.
All right, third time's a charm. Once again, the question, does President Donald Trump actually believe Democrats hate those of the Jewish community? Let's see if this one gets it.
I didn't hear you actually answer the question. So yes or no, does the president truly believe that Democrats hate Jews?
Let's hear it.
I am not going to comment on a potentially leaked document. I can tell you what,
Does he think Democrats hate Jewish people, as he said on the South?
I think that they've had a lot of opportunities over the last few weeks to condemn some abhorrent comments. I'm trying to answer. If you'd stop talking, I'll finish my statement. The president has had and laid out clearly his position on this matter. Democrats have had a number of opportunities to condemn specific comments and have refused to do that. That's a question, frankly, I think you should ask Democrats what their position is, since they're unwilling to call this what it is and call it out by name and take actual action against members who have done things like this, like the Republicans have done when they had the same opportunity.
I want to ask about Paul Manafort, but I just want to be very clear. You're not answering the question. Is there a reason?
I believe I answered it twice.
No, you didn't answer it
really
once.
Believe Democrats hate Jews. I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
I think that's a question you ought to ask the Democrats.
Strike
right.
3, you're out.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, that was sad.
Wait, hold on. Here comes CNN's Jim Acosta.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's see if he can get an answer here. Once again, the question posed, if you just tuned in here on the live stream, does our president, Donald Trump, actually believe that the Democratic Party are an anti-Jewish party? Jim Acosta, let's see if he gets it here. Let's see if I can find the Acosta clip. Here we go.
You're saying something that's just patently untrue. I mean, obviously,
stating their policy positions is not patently untrue.
Democrats don't hate Jewish people. It's just silly. It's not true.
I think they should call out their members by name, and we've made that clear. I don't have anything further. April?
President,
Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
Oh, Jim,
no,
what a bold. Sorry. One more time. The question was specific. Does Donald Trump think that the Democratic Party, Democrats in this country, hate Jewish people? All right? She is ducking and dodging. She won't say it. Trump said they did it. Trump said he said it at that press conference right before he went to Alabama. So they just want to make sure. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe he stumbled. Maybe it was just something that popped in his head. Maybe he didn't get enough sleep that night.
Wait, let's double check.
And so the
The Democrats have become
fifth reporter,
an
like the first four, now
anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party,
There it is.
and that's too bad. I'm going to Alabama.
I'm going to Alabama. So I'm ducking out of here. Man, so much ducking and dodging. See, that's what they're doing. They're playing that game, folks. They're playing that wedge issue game. Donald John Trump knows that he could try to wedge Jewish voters away from the Democratic Party, get them to vote Republican in key swing states like Florida or, well, New York's not a swing state. Although, if he gets enough people to leave the Democratic Party, it may turn into a swing state. Florida being the key one, and that's the game he's playing, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders is dancing rather than directly answer that question. And by the way, one more time, to all my Jewish brothers and sisters out there, if you think the Republican Party of Donald John Trump is a safe harbor for you right now, this is the President of the United States who would not denounce Nazis who are marching in the streets of Virginia. Don't get fooled, people. Don't get fooled.
Now, of course, we will keep you posted on these stories as today's program rolls along. Benny, Jay, I have a quick question. Kind of the same question I ask about this time every day. You ready to find out what's going on in Chicago and or Illinois?
I was born ready.
Love that answer. Never a bad answer, especially at this time, because people, coming up after this short little break, we're going to find out what else is news.
I cannot wait. This is where the doctor plucks that little trick from his little sleeve. We'll see what it is when we return.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, The Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show.
Hey, everybody. Join the Chicago Sun-Times at one of our upcoming Hear Our Voice community forums and dive even deeper into Chicago politics. In conjunction with our partner, AARP, these conversations are your chance to learn more about the future of Chicago. We've even invited mayoral candidates Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle, yes, indeed, Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle, to join us as active listeners, attending the forums to better understand your opinions and hear your voice. The first forum is Wednesday, March 13th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the DuSable Museum of African American History in Hyde Park. I invite you to join the conversation with a great lineup of panelists that include Mary Mitchell and Mark Brown from the Sun-Times, Rosanna Marquez from AARP, and Mays Jackson. Yes, indeed, Mays Jackson will be there from WVON AM 1690. The second forum is Monday, March 18th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Arturo Velasquez Institute in Pilsen and features panelists Mark Brown from the Sun-Times, Rosanna Marquez from AARP, and Fernando Diaz from the Chicago Reporter. Best of all, these events are free. That's free, Dennis. Free as in F-R-E-E. Free meaning you don't have to pay money to attend them, all right?
Oh, great.
Okay, just so you know that. For sign-up
Can you
details.
spell free again? It's a little slow.
Free.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So for sign-up details, go to suntimes.com/ is that what you call that
That'd be
thing?
a forward slash?
Forward slash.
We'll get there. We'll get there, guys.
AARP-forum, FORUM. Folks, check this out. March 18th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Arturo Velasquez Institute in Pilsen, and March 13th at the DuSable Museum of African American History in Hyde Park.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show.
Yes, indeed. We are back live, and guess who's in the studio? The man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Gary, Indiana, one of the greatest graduates of Roosevelt High School in the history of the state of Indiana. Monroe Anderson. Welcome back, Monroe.
It's good to be back. Good to be back.
It's Monroe Monday and a Tuesday.
Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to have to change the name.
I know.
Oh, we came up with names. What was the first one? Monroe Country.
There's Monroe Country. There's Monroe Doctrine. There's
Monroe Midweek.
Whoa. Get out the bong on that one, Monroe. Midweek Monroe. I like it. We're going to have our crack marketing team work on that one.
That's me.
Monroe Midweek. I'm writing it down.
And Dennis is a genius, so I know he'll figure it out real quick.
He'll figure it out. By the way, in the last show, when Monroe would come on, I always say, Monroe, take Elston Avenue. All right? And he'd be like, no, I'm going to take the highway. Even only when he drove me home would he take Elston Avenue just to, like, you know, make me feel better or whatever, indulge me.
So you wouldn't get lost.
Yeah. Anyway, so how did you get here today?
Elston Avenue.
He took.
That's awesome.
He took. He took Elston.
Elston was faster than the highway.
There you go. All right. Monroe has all these devices to tell him how fast things are going. Anyway, Monroe is here mainly to talk Trump, and Trump, but he is also a Chicago journalist. He was Gene Sawyer's former press secretary, knows a lot, Mayor Gene Sawyer, I should say, from the 80s. And no, he never made it to the 90s. He lost in 89, didn't he?
Yes. To Richard M.
Daley. Yeah, Chicago. Great move in that election. Chicago. Another great job by the Chicago voting electorate. So, let's include him in our discussion of the local news, D, before we have Trump, and Trump.
Absolutely. We're about to find out what's going on locally. It is time for What Else is News. Mm-hmm. The magic number is, hold on, let me check. Okay. Oh, yeah, great. The magic number is 21, everybody. 21 days until our Chicago runoff elections. And yes, that means 21 days until we have a new mayor. But who will it be? Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle or former prosecutor and former Chicago Police Board President Lori Lightfoot? Decisions. Seriously, though, no BS. For some people, this is a tough decision. Preckwinkle or Lightfoot? Both liberal, both women, and both, more often than not, seem to agree with each other when it comes to actual policies. Guys, let's be honest. It really does take a Chicago political know-it-all to break down the distinct differences between these candidates. And I'm not sure if you knew this or not, guys, but not every voter is a Chicago political know-it-all. You know what I mean? Yeah. In fact, you big city brainiacs are a minority here. So basically, at this moment, your guess is as good as ours when it comes to who's winning this thing. But you'd better believe that we'll be right here following along with it, providing helpful insight with guests and news stories from both sides. News stories like the one that broke right as we ended our show on Friday. Yes, Mr. Joravsky, before it sails completely away from the news cycle, we must hear your take on this. It started as a simple endorsement. On Friday, former Chicago mayoral candidate Willie Wilson, who, by the way, got almost 60,000 votes and won 13 wards on the city's south and west sides. We had Willie on the show last week, and he made sure to remind Ben of that fact, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
That was really funny. He reminded you like 3 times. But Willie announced that he will be backing Lori Lightfoot in the 2019 mayoral runoff election. Grab the clip here. There we go. Boy, I'm not doing well.
We met with Dr. Lightfoot here, I believe 3 times in person. And we also met once with Tony Preckwinkle. And we talked, But the problem is with Chicago is corruption.
Amen. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the other one is how can you expect things to change when she is the machine?
Yes, that was a Tony burn, my friends.
Yeah, no, Willie went hard, but he called her Dr. Lightfoot. He's like me calling you Dr. D. I'm going to start Dr. Miles, Dr. Monroe. Everybody's a doctor. Is Lori Lightfoot a doctor? I don't. When you're a lawyer, are you a doctor?
No.
No? Okay, yeah. So anyway, whatever.
Esquire.
Yeah, Esquire Lightfoot. Yeah, no.
And I want to be a master, not a doctor.
Oh, Master Monroe. Yeah, I was not surprised. Well, actually, in retrospect, it seemed obvious that Willie Wilson would endorse Lightfoot. There's some bad blood between Willie Wilson and Tony Preckwinkle going back to the soda pop tax. Willie Wilson was against the soda pop tax. Of course, Tony Preckwinkle was for it. Ricky Hendon, our old friend Ricky. What's going on, Ricky?
Hey, Ricky.
Led the charge to stir up opposition to the soda pop tax. I remember a great debate at the Hideout between Ricky Hendon and Stacey Davis Gates. What a great debate that was, among other things, the soda pop tax. You remember our good friend Richard Boykin, who was Cook County Board Commissioner, big ally of Willie Wilson and Ricky Hendon, and he was defeated by Brandon Johnson, an ally of Stacey Davis Gates, on that issue to a certain degree. So there's some tension between Willie Wilson and Tony Preckwinkle on that previous issue, and in retrospect, I can understand why he would endorse Lori Lightfoot.
So Willie Wilson endorsing Lori Lightfoot in the Chicago mayoral runoff. Okay, now here's where it gets a little weird. According to Chicago mayoral candidate Tony Preckwinkle, Willie Wilson, before endorsing Lightfoot on Friday, and when speaking with Preckwinkle about his possible endorsement, Wilson told Tony Preckwinkle that his endorsement is, quote, contingent upon him receiving guaranteed clout appointments for various city commissions and departments. Preckwinkle also accused Wilson of demanding that Preckwinkle help retire the debt that remains from his self-funded mayoral campaign. Those are promises that Preckwinkle said that she was, quote, unwilling to make.
Yeah. Anything is possible in the city of Chicago, a shakedown city, if ever there was one. Willie Wilson vehemently denies that, by the way, and he points out that he's very well off. That's one of his selling points. He says that he's very well off. He can finance his own campaigns. He doesn't need to turn to contributors, and he certainly doesn't need to turn to Tony Preckwinkle. Now, we've seen in the past, Monroe Anderson, candidates who have been defeated in a primary looking to the people who defeated them to help pay off their loans, retire their debt. So it's not something completely new. I personally, at the risk of sounding naive, do not believe Willie Wilson tried to shake down the Tony Preckwinkle campaign. If you recall, when Willie was here last week, what did he say, D? He says, what distinguishes him from so many other people in the world, Monroe Anderson, is that while you or I may sign the back of our paychecks, he signs the front of the paychecks. That's classic Willie Wilson. So it's his way of saying, I don't need Tony Preckwinkle's money.
All right, so there we go here. Like you said here, Wilson said that did not happen. Let's see. So how about walking us through this one here? First off, I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit, the history between Willie Wilson and Tony Preckwinkle.
Yeah,
is there any more besides the sugar tax?
Well, no, that's the main one. But, you know, the other issue that just popped up, and it's in the front page above the Tribune, and this has to do with a different issue, not directly with Willie Wilson. I would love to hear what Monroe thinks about this. Was Tony Preckwinkle dog whistling at the debate last week? I don't know if you saw this, Monroe.
That's why I saw the news footage.
You saw the news footage. I actually was watching the debate, and it was that moment of the debate where Carol Maureen asked each candidate to say something nice about the other one. Now, everyone knows it's a standard question. They have to anticipate that now. Any candidate has to anticipate, saying something nice about the other person. So you have to figure a way to say something nice that also underscores a point you want to make that makes you look good. You know what I'm saying?
That's the trick.
And that is the trick. And so what Tony Preckwinkle did was to say, yeah, what I like about Lori Lightfoot is she's honest. That's the word she used about being a lesbian, an open lesbian. Yeah. And many people responded by saying, that sure sounds like she's trying to call attention to the fact that Lori Lightfoot is openly gay, and in the hopes of getting some conservative voters to turn against her. What's your reaction on that one?
That probably was what was going on. Otherwise, why make the point?
Well, you don't think so? In other words, that Toni Preckwinkle, in her heart, really admired Lori Lightfoot for being open about.
Well, the only reason she might feel that way is if she was of a particular interest that way also, and she wasn't unable to be honest.
I see. So she was like, okay, I understand where you're going with that one. Monroe Anderson doing a little dog whistling of his own. Personally, if that was her strategy, D, I don't think it's a very sound strategy. I mean, number one, I don't think there's a swing vote community in the city of Chicago that would turn against Lori Lightfoot because they just
maybe the black church, maybe.
You know, I've never bought that. That is a debate. We've had that debate. Yeah, you and I have had that debate.
And I was sitting in Mayor Sawyer's office when he met with Tracy Payne and some other gay activists about instituting a civil rights law for the gay community. Mm-hmm. And he talked to them, and they listened. He listened. They talked. When they left, he said, well, he didn't know what he was going to do because the black ministers were against the whole gay thing. Mm-hmm. And what I told him was, you got to sign it. It's the right thing to do. It's a civil rights issue for them as civil rights issues were for us.
All right.
And he did it.
And he lost the subsequent election to Mayor Daley, but there is no evidence, absolutely no evidence, that one black voter voted for Daley because of that issue. And that's the point I keep making.
Yeah, but that's the type of thing that you it's hard to track down, to poll. I mean, that's a difficult issue. And the black community was against gay marriage until President Obama evolved. And that changed.
Wait, which of evolution? There were two evolutions that Obama went. The first evolution, first he was for gay marriage, then he evolved into being against gay marriage. Right. By the way, he was for gay marriage when he was a state senator from Hyde Park, and there are a lot of black voters in that district.
Yeah, but that's a liberal. Hyde Park is different from any other community in Chicago.
But his evolution to becoming against gay marriage occurred when he decided to run for a statewide Senate office, and it wasn't black voters he was worried about, it was white voters. So then he evolved into being against gay marriage, and then once successfully reelected in 2012, never going to run for office again. Guess what? He evolved back to what he originally was.
No, it didn't happen. You're broad brushing that one. What happened was Biden outed him. Basically, Biden said that he was for gay marriages, and it looked bad for the vice president to be for gay marriages.
Wait, now do you think Biden did that on his own, or do you think that was just part of a strategy to see how it flew?
That I don't know.
Yeah, that's like David Axelrod would have cooked up. Boss, this is what we're gonna do.
Exactly right. Yeah, that one I don't know, but it could go either way.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to tell you this. The point is about dog whistling Preckwinkle. Just imagine this, Monroe. People watching the debate.
Right.
So I do not believe there was anybody watching that debate who did not know already that Lori Lightfoot was openly gay. I do not believe there was one person. The subset of people who actually watch a mayoral debate are people who are pretty intelligent or knowledgeable about Chicago politics. And everybody knew that from the first go-around. So it's like, who is learning something new from watching this mayoral debate on this point?
So then maybe Toni was sincere.
Maybe she was sincere. We've come back to
okay, but let's factor this in. Okay.
Yeah.
Assuming that I'm right about the black church,
mm-hmm.
then, and Willie has a black church in his hip pocket. He's been making contributions
mm-hmm.
out of his wealth for years,
mm-hmm.
many years, well before he was running for mayor. So then his constituency, which is iffy on this whole gay thing. We're supposed to back Lori. So that's going to be interesting to see how
Yeah.
that goes down.
I stand by what I said. I do not believe that this issue is an informative issue, an important swing issue among black voters. I've never seen any evidence of that being the case.
Here's Lori Lightfoot on her endorsement from Willie Wilson.
What we need to be doing is focused on what brings us together, what unites us, so that we can move this city forward in a way that we frankly have never seen before. And Dr. Wilson's 100% right. Time has come for change. The corruption must end.
So there you are.
I love the guys in the background who just bellow stuff out. Yeah!
Yeah! So we actually posted the question to you on our Facebook and Twitter pages with the Willie Wilson endorsement now added to the ongoing saga known as our 2019 Chicago mayoral runoff election. Will this be a tough choice for you come Election Day, or is it a no-brainer? If you've yet to do so, weigh in on the conversation already taking place on the Facebook page. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. Ben, could you please spell that last name for everyone?
Jorav, as in victory, as my bowling team did last night. SKY.
So you have no excuse. And get the conversation started on our Twitter page at Benny J Show on Twitter. It looks like our two mayoral candidates conducted an editorial board meeting today with that one newspaper. Ben, what's the name of that newspaper again? I can't remember.
Not the Tribunal?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, the Chicago Tribunal. Yeah,
Chicago Tribune. Yeah, that's right. But later on, we'll try to provide some audio from that board meeting between the candidates. But hey, just like that, you're now in the know of what's going on in Chicago, and now you will have an answer the next time someone asks you, hey, what else is news?
All right, well, let me tell you something.
Okay.
Something that the Monroe Doctrine, something that Monroe Anderson, and Anderson Cooper all agree on.
Wow.
You did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. We'll be right back with Monroe after this.
If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Boehm at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Boehm at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's CORP as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed, we are live. We're in our beautiful studio at the Sun-Times building, and with me in the studio, Monroe Anderson, making his debut on this particular show. He was on the show every Monday that I used to have, but we're not talking about that show anymore. We're talking about this show. And anyway, Monroe always talks about Trump, and Trump. So let's get started in the Trump talk, Monroe. First of all, Nancy Pelosi announced, when was it, yesterday, I think it was, or that she was not in favor of the impeachment of Donald John Trump. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it was a brilliant political move. She is a master. She really is a master. Because the Republicans have been going on and on already about how the Democrats just want to impeach him for some strange reason. And so what she does is say, no, we're not, I don't want him impeached. He's not worth it. That we should focus on the investigation.
Yeah, which will lead to impeachment
exactly.
or indictment.
Exactly, right. But let's take impeachment off the table.
Why is impeachment such a dirty word?
Impeachment is a dirty word because you had Clinton and you had Nixon impeached. Neither one were actually impeached. It's become more of a political act than the founding fathers may or may not have intended it to be.
So in other words, you could turn impeachment into a political act in which one party is trying to undercut the credibility of the other party, which was clearly what the Republicans were doing when they impeached Bill Clinton for his sexual affairs back in the 90s. But if you have an indictment that somehow or other in the public's eyes is removed from the politics of things, it's as though...
Well, maybe not with the Trump people. I mean, we are in such a twilight zone situation right now. You just it's hard to, well, it depends on which world. If you're in the real world or if you're in the opposite world of the Republicans, it's just hard to determine how this is going to go down. As you know, from day one, when I was on your other show, I predicted that Trump would be impeached.
Yes.
The last time I was on that other show, I predicted that Trump would be impeached by the 4th of July.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
I didn't believe it then.
Right, I know. I went out on a limb. And I
well,
said
that's
so.
for sure.
And I said so at the time.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Now, I'm not so sure. I mean, it's still a good possibility by 4th of July.
4th of July?
Yeah.
We were in March. That's April, May, June.
Oh,
That's 4 months from now.
What a mathematician.
Right, exactly.
Just call me Daniel Best, folks.
But the Mueller investigation hasn't dropped yet. Once it drops, if he says, okay, he is Putin's puppet, here's the evidence, boom, 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 boom. He does one of his storied reports where he just goes through everything, where it reads like a John le Carré novel or something like that, then the Republicans may have no other choice but to go to Trump and say, if you don't leave, we're all going to. We thought the midterms in 2018 were terrible.
Yeah.
2020 is going to be a bloodbath.
Well, I cannot. I just cannot imagine that happening at this stage. I think the point you made was absolutely right on target. The way the Republicans are attacking the credibility of the investigators.
Yeah.
Like in the old days, you could attack the credibility of other politicians who are impeaching you, saying, "Oh, they're just they're trying to promote their party. They're partisan." But typically, investigators were considered off limits for attacks, particularly by Republicans, supposedly the party of law and order.
Right.
But now they have been systematically attacking the credibility of the FBI, the Justice Department, and Mueller, et cetera, et cetera.
The media.
And the media, of course, the media.
Everybody but Trump and his crooks. But this is the problem. Not only do you have Mueller after Trump, but you have the Southern District of New York after him, and they're doing a RICO investigation, organized crime. Then you have the Eastern Virginia court doing things. I mean, he is going to bleed from 1,000 cuts. He really is. They're going to bleed him out.
Now, Monroe,
and that could happen within 4 months.
Well, that would be okay. So you're saying there could be an indictment within 4 months, as opposed to impeachment.
It can be an indictment. It could be impeachment. It could be that somebody sends him a message that Junior and Ivanka is going to be indicted if he doesn't get out of Dodge.
Don't you think Donald Trump would just throw his kids under the bus if it was between his neck and theirs? Who would he?
Not Ivanka.
You think he would take the fall for his daughter?
He loves his daughter.
Yeah, I think he loves himself more than he loves his daughter.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You know, we were talking about last week Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, the great comic, who went to federal penitentiary on a really hyped up, bogus drug charge, rather than see his son go to prison. It was either the feds basically said, if you go, we won't indict your son. We won't go after your son.
Exactly.
He took the hard fall for son. A lot of respect for him.
Flynn did the same thing.
Yes, to protect baby Flynn.
Right.
I cannot see Donald Trump protecting anybody except for Donald Trump.
Well, the thing is, Donald Trump really doesn't care about the presidency. It's in the sense of, this is what I've always wanted to do, and I can do great for everybody. If his children go to jail, he's going to be so hobbled as a president that it's not going to be worth keeping. So I think he would step down to save Ivanka.
Monroe, since the last time you were on the show, has there anything emerged in terms of the investigation of Donald Trump that has surprised you or that makes you believe even more that Trump is in danger? I'm just trying to think of all the investigations that have gone down the last 6 weeks, all the revelations, anything that really stands out?
No surprises. But what's really good is the blue wave that gave the Democrats the House back. And so they are going to investigate him out of the yin-yang. And that stuff is going to be televised.
Well, that's the political spectacle of it all,
right,
with the Democrats having taken charge of the House. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so for the non-believers out there who can't imagine that Trump is as bad as he is, or who unwillingly refuse to believe it, they're going to hear person after person telling sordid tale after sordid tale. And you only can be delusional for so long.
My guest is Monroe Anderson. Monroe Monday is a staple in this show, even though we're having it on a Tuesday, talking Trump, 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 and Trump. We'll have much, much more with Monroe when we return.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show.
All right, Ben Joravsky here. Monroe Anderson in the studio with me. Yes, that Monroe Anderson. It's Monroe Monday on a Tuesday. We're talking Trump, 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 and Trump. We're going to have a contest. The winner will get a blue Mustang. Someone come. Oh,
okay,
no,
we're not doing that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We never do that.
We never do that. Yeah, to come up with a new name for.
I don't even drive. I would take the Mustang. I take the bus.
You actually have a license, though. I've been in a car with Dennis driving. He's a very good driver.
I don't play around.
All right, yeah.
10 and 2, seatbelt speed limit.
He learned to drive while in radio school in Alton, Illinois. Anyway, we're going to have a contest one of these days and figure out a new name for this segment. Since we're on Monday, we're no longer
Monday.
Monday.
Let's ask the live streamers and the downloaders that we're looking for a name for the Monroe segment. I think so far we got Monroe Country, the Monroe Doctrine,
and the Pride and Joy of Gary, Indiana. That's not really
and Middays with Monroe.
Oh yeah, Middays with Monroe. Anyway,
midweek.
Midweek.
Yeah, midweek with Monroe.
Middle of the week.
There we go. Yeah, you're totally right. Midweek
Midweek
with Monroe. Head over to the live chat or the Facebook page, however you reach us, and give us some ideas for a Monroe segment name.
All right, very good. Monroe, the latest scandal that seems to be breaking about Trump hasn't really hit the front pages of the papers yet, but it will be there soon. It has to do with his his performance in college. Talk about this.
Okay. We have a scandal today that just broke where a bunch of rich people have been buying their children into the elite Ivy League schools.
Buying their way in.
Buying in. They've been bribing coaches where they present their daughters. This happened at Yale. Their daughters get athletic scholarships and weren't even on the team. they've SAT scores. They've been bribing people, jacking those up, and I mean, it's so elaborate. It's a RICO investigation, coast to coast. $25 million is one guy, William Singer, got to do this thing. So far, there are 50 arrests, all rich people who wanted their children to get into these Ivy League schools, including Felicia Hoffman,
the actress.
The actress who's married to William Macy, and Lori Logan. Anyway, another actress, not as well known. And CEOs. This has been how it's been teased, reported on television, and what the FBI said, that it was actresses and CEOs. Children
really trying to worm their kids into these high-class schools, which are supposed to be determined by a meritocracy, where the highest scorers are
either that, or you should be grandfathered in
because your dad or mom or like you're a legacy kid, what they call it.
Yeah, right. But they have been literally just buying. The amounts of money involved in this were some people paid as much as $6 million to get their kid in the school.
$6 million? Who gets the money?
Singer, this guy Singer got the money, but then he paid off the people who could get them into the school.
I see. Wow.
For example, a coach has been indicted at Yale of the women's soccer team. Anyway, this is the Trump connection.
All right, I'm waiting for this Trump connection.
The Trump connection is that obviously Daddy Trump, Fred Trump, paid to get Donald into Wharton.
Wharton being the University of Pennsylvania, high-class business school at Penn, which is an Ivy League school in Philadelphia.
Exactly, and that's what Trump brags about, how he's kind of smart or kind of a genius or something, and that he went to the best schools and he was the top of his class. Okay, it was reported last week that he wasn't magna anything. He was not in the top of his class. It was published that he was not in the top of his class. And what's really important about that is when Trump was being the godfather of birtherism, attacking Obama for not being born in America, but being born in Kenya and therefore illegitimate as a president. The other thing he kept demanding was to see Obama's test scores, his school scores, with the implication that Obama was in fact an affirmative action person. And in the meantime, what's really interesting with the FBI, when they had their press conference, they had a press conference about this scandal today. One of the agents says, it's one thing if you try and get your kid in by promising to build a building, a wing in the college. He said, but this was just outright thievery that they were doing.
I'm trying to understand the distinction, actually. I mean, what is really the difference when you? I'll tell you what. If you let Joey in, I'll build you an entire new library that costs $50 million, as opposed to I'll pay off this coach. I mean, I don't understand what the distinction. One is.
The thing is, we don't have millions and millions to toss around, so we can't quite understand that distinction.
One of the greatest scams that has gone on for a long time, in my lifetime and yours too, since we're roughly the same age, Monroe, is this notion that somehow or other, when a black kid gets into a school that's looking to build its black enrollment through affirmative action, that kid's getting a break, and a white kid doesn't get, as though white kids don't get tons of breaks all the time.
Exactly.
Across the board, wealthy white kids whose daddy could buy the...
Exactly. No, in this indictment, the FBI says that these people who were bribing the universities, these Ivy League schools, to get them in, they had the means for their children to have every advantage they could to get them to them in the first place without skullduggery.
So one of the indictments that's emerged about regarding Trump over the last year is the New York Times has been really hard on this particular issue, Monroe, is the way in which his daddy, Fred Trump, paved the way for Donnie.
Right.
You know, first of all, turning over. He was a millionaire, I think, by the age of, I forget, some like 8 or whatever it is. Because
he was getting $200,000 a year.
Yeah, no, because by Fred Trump paying it to Donald Trump, Fred Trump didn't have to pay taxes on it, and so they were saving tax dollars and enriching Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Something that Donald Trump didn't talk about when he was campaigning in Alabama.
Trump, who, according to the Washington Post, the past 2 years since he's been president, has told 9,014 lies. Obviously,
is that how it's at now? 9,000.
Yeah, 9,000. Wow. He keeps escalating on the lies. The more desperate the things get, the more he lies.
Well,
anyway, his story, if you'll remember, back when he was first running, was that his father loaned him $1 million or something like that, and that's how he built his fortune and became this billionaire. Well, as it turned out, his father gave him at least $20 million, not one. And he would, every time Donald would screw up another business, his father would give him more money. And then the Russians were giving him money, and the Saudis were giving him money. So
there was always somebody bailing out Donnie Trump. Monroe Anderson's my guest. We're talking Trump. We'll be right back after this.
If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's CORP as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. All right, everybody. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Tuesday, March 12th is moments away. But we got to remind you people that the Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by unions. Yeah, and a bunch of them. Listen to this. These hardworking men and women were kind enough to get behind us in this online podcasting experience. So before we continue, we want to make sure to thank the following unions for making this show possible. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith workers, aerospace, Local 126 and District 8. And we also got to thank the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. We'd like to thank them as well. And thank you once again to the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show starts now. Yes, it is Tuesday, March 12th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, we still got Monroe Anderson in studio. We welcome Adolfo Mondragon and host of the Mike Novak Show. Yeah, Mike Novak. And now your host, believe it or not, host of the Ben Joravsky Show. Crazy world we're living in. Chicago Reader columnist, Ben Joravsky.
All right, Ben Joravsky here. Let me get this straight. Mike Novak is the host of the Mike Novak Show, correct?
Yes.
All right. Just wanted to get
nice.
Well done. He'll be here in about a half an hour. El Dragon is in the studio. El Dragon is in the studio. And that's Adolfo. Your Mike working there. Adolfo Mondragon, political activist, strategist, election law lawyer from the southwest side of Chicago. He's going to explain to us, to the universe, why the good people of the 14th Ward saw fit to re-elect Monroe, re-elect your old friend.
Yes.
And I say that with a smile. Alderman Ed Burke. Adolfo, I don't know if you know this, but many years ago when Monroe was the press secretary to Mayor Eugene Sawyer, he didn't always get along that well with Ed Burke. Isn't that correct, Monroe?
Right. In fact, didn't you write an op-ed or something not too long ago wishing Burke really well in somewhere hot?
No.
Or was that somebody else?
No, that was somebody else. Back when I was Mayor Sawyer's press secretary, I was interviewed by the Tribune, and Burke was threatening to run for mayor. And I was quoted as saying that he couldn't do it. He couldn't run for mayor because all the black people in Chicago hated him because of what he did to Sawyer.
Yeah.
I said he was a pariah. And he was so upset with me that we were at Cup's his cruise that he did to raise
the
money.
Vet Cup, of course, the legendary columnist from way back when for the Sun Times, right here in the Chicago Sun Times. Okay,
and we're on Navy Pier. And Burke threatens to kick my
you can say it. You can say it. It's podcasting.
Podcast. He threatened. He said he ought to kick my ass.
Burke said that to you?
Yes, to me. Yelled it across about a.
What did you say? Bring it on, buddy.
Exactly, right.
Hey, man, he's from Gary, Indiana.
And coincidentally, I was with Sawyer's bodyguards, and he had his bodyguards.
The bodyguards could fight it out.
Right, exactly. My bodyguards would take on your bodyguards. But then he threatened to write me out of the budget.
Oh, because you were press secretary.
My salary, because I was press secretary. And so I do a TV interview with, and I talk about my young children and my wife and how this would be horrible for my family. and of course, I knew he wasn't going to write me out of the budget. He was just really upset.
He was upset. Yeah.
But we hugged it out in Denver at the Democratic National Convention back in 2008.
2008,
when Obama was being nominated. We were after there was a party and we ran into each other, and somebody who was one of his people says, "You guys ought to just hug it out." So there's a photograph somewhere of the two of us, not into a church hug, but like one of those buddy hugs, side by side. Yeah, right.
I love you, Ed.
Right, Monroe, was that the infamous Hug It Out Democratic National Convention?
No, that was 2012. I know what you're talking about, Adolfo. What a memory you have. 2012. I think it was 2012. No. It was 208. You're right. Everybody was hugging everybody.
Exactly.
Blagojevich was hugging Madigan. Madigan.
Exactly.
Right.
No, that's why we ended up doing
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Suggested it. Right, exactly.
2008, the Democrats had their national convention in Denver. They were nominating Obama, so, the son of the state. Right. And everybody said, we got to get along.
Yes.
And by that time, Blagojevich was fighting Madigan. Various Democrats were fighting each other. They all hugged.
Right.
And then about 6 months later, Blagojevich is being dragged out of his house in handcuffs. That hugging didn't last very long.
It's funny because as a Latino, always think of these big generalissimo hugs, that presidents give each other and stuff. It's all hypocritical, but you got to give the hug.
Yeah, the hug indeed. Yeah,
I'm sure ours was too.
I know Monroe was not crying when Ed Burke got indicted. All right, we're going to broaden the discussion here, move away from Trump for a little bit. We've got Adolfo Mondragon in the studio with us. And Adolfo, as I said, is a political activist, a strategist, an election law lawyer, former candidate himself on the southwest side of Chicago, born and raised in the southwest side of Chicago, graduated from Curie High School.
That's right.
And he got into Yale. He really got into Yale.
Right.
He didn't. His daddy didn't buy.
$500,000 to bribe soccer coaches.
Did you hear the story that Monroe was talking about the scandal erupting?
I read the stuff in the morning, the paper about Hollywood. Felicity Huffman and some other people, and also other.
Well, just in general terms, before we go to the infinite wisdom of the Southwest Siders to reelect Ed Burke as their alderman, what's your thoughts about this, Adolfo? You watch how the game is played, politically speaking, where Republicans try to undercut affirmative action and turn it into a negative word, looking the other way at all these other incidences where white people are just sneaking their way into these elitist schools. What's your thoughts about this?
Well, yeah, you don't call it affirmative action when you talk about legacies.
Right.
You don't talk about athletic scholarships and all sorts of other ways of, if your daddy endows something at the school, of course, that's another form of affirmative action. So it's just a nice way of shifting the blame somewhere else.
I thought schools like Yale were not supposed to give athletic scholarships out. I thought it was all like need-based scholarships, and that they didn't pay kids to come to their schools to play.
So the thing with the Ivy Leagues is that that was what set them apart, I think, in the 50s when they formed, was that they weren't going to give athletic scholarships, but you do give a bunch of financial aid that goes along with it for people who play your sports, but there's no incentive to go out and get the best player versus somebody who is balanced out as a really good player and also a great academic student.
Although what they do look for is the very best player who can possibly, even remotely, attend that school. With,
it's the lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah, so it's like they want to win the game, all right, Adolfo? They don't want to lose. Right. Put Ben on the team.
Right. So and my wife Joyce has an MFA from Yale.
Right. I thought I read that before.
Yeah. But she actually. Her mother didn't give any millions.
She didn't build a gym.
No, she didn't build a
gym. Joyce Owens gym.
Did she get her MFA when all those famous people were there at
Meryl Streep?
Meryl Streep and
I think she's after Meryl Streep, isn't she?
No. She was Meryl Streep's husband, Donald Gummer, and Joyce were in the same MFA program. There were only 12 artists selected from around the country, and she and Gummer were one.
All right, let's turn attention to the 14th Ward. Monroe was talking about Ed Burke, just people who are outside of Chicago or even people who don't know Chicago politics. Ed Burke is the legendary chairman of the Finance Committee in the Chicago City Council, arguably the most powerful alderman in the city of Chicago. He's also a Democratic committeeman who plays an important role in slating judges. Yes, right, those judges that govern the cases. Many of them hold their positions thanks to getting the endorsement of Ed Burke, his wife. Ann Burke, if it wasn't enough, she is on the state Supreme Court. Yes. This man is the epitome of power in the city of Chicago. Shame on the city of Chicago for allowing him to have so much power. He was also, as Monroe pointed out, the leader of the anti-Harold Washington faction of white aldermen in the 80s before Adolfo was even born.
The two Eddies.
The two Eddies, Eddie Berdoyak and Eddie Burke. So there's a shamefulness to his legacy, and yet Mayor Rahm and Mayor Daley looked the other way, Adolfo, all these years. They let Burke sit at that Finance Committee chair. Every single contract, people, that the city of Chicago signs went through Ed Burke's committee. All the TIF deals, all that hundreds of millions of dollars gets thrown around the city of Chicago, went through Ed Burke's committee. That meant people, lawyers, architects, people who were part of that gravy train, going to kick a little money over to Ed Burke. This was going on, and then lo and behold, what the feds catch Ed Burke doing? Trying to shake down some Burger King franchisee? Adolfo, help me out. I can't remember the intricacies.
So he was trying to get the tax business, but a friend of mine was like, well, what was the big deal with this one particular Burger King? Well, apparently, I didn't look it up, but the owner or the corporation that owns that Burger King also owns a bunch of other Burger Kings, like hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just about getting the tax business for that one place. It was getting the tax business for all of them.
All right. In addition to all this power he has as the head of the Finance Committee, he also finds time in a very busy schedule to operate a property tax appeal business where he takes clients and gets their property reduced in value so they pay less in taxes and all the rest of us pay more to pick up the slack. All right. So he was getting business from, he was trying to shake down allegedly, the Burger King franchisee, and the feds indicted him. The indictment came about 6 weeks ago, I want to say, maybe 2 months ago, something like that, Adolfo. Anyway, fast forward, he's up for re-election. Now, apparently, you get to run even if you're indicted, correct?
Well, yeah, that's correct. The law only prohibits you if you've been convicted.
I see, okay.
Of a crime.
Because, of course, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
All right. So talk a little bit about the election.
So just full disclosure, I do practice election law, and initially Jaime Guzman, who ran, was one of the finally at the end was one of the two people who ran against Burke, was my client he hired me to get him on the ballot, although he didn't get a challenge. So after that, I became a volunteer because I was so impressed by, his campaign. So that's just full disclosure. I am biased towards Jaime Guzman, but that gives me insight because I actually was on the ground also.
And you also, full disclosure, once were an employee of Ed Burke, correct?
That's correct. So I ran against Tony Munoz for Senate back in 2010, and then again in 12. And in between, I get an infamous call, and because the aldermanic elections are coming up, and because I lived in his ward, and I had done well in the 14th ward against Tony, I get pressured to take something from the alderman. And so when you're in that conundrum, you try to figure out, well, how do I take something without really taking it? Mm-hmm. And so finally, what I was able to do in this game of chess back and forth was able to get an opportunity to see how his ward ran from the inside. So I was there for about 7 months, just enough to see how everything ran, and then I was out.
All right, you were out. So you had a sense of his strengths and his weaknesses.
That's correct.
All right, so explain why it is that the citizens of the 14th Ward decided to reelect Ed Burke. I think he won with about 52%. I'm doing this off the top of my head.
So it's really close, like 52, 53%, something like that.
All right.
So I think the first factor is gerrymandering, right? So every 10 years we do the census, and his ward, now you remind me, where did he first start out? How far east? Was he around Halsted?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah.
When he first ran for office?
Right, back in the early 70s.
Right, and so now the ward starts around Kedzie.
Mm-hmm. So for folks who are geographically challenged or out of they're moving the ward boundaries further and further west, or they're almost at the city's edge, almost going into the suburbs if they would.
And so the current map of the 14th Ward includes at one end Brighton Park, so right around Kedzie Archer, and it goes along Archer all the way to the far end of the K Streets in what used to be the 23rd Ward, right? Zalewski. And it gets, when it goes down Archer, it gets Brighton Park, Archer Heights, and Garfield Ridge. And then it goes a little bit south and gets a piece of Gage Park. So the primarily Latino part of it is Brighton Park, Gage Park, and Archer Heights, which is mixed. But as you go west along Archer and you get into Garfield Ridge, you're starting to get into city and county workers because, again, that's an infamous border area.
Yeah, the police, the firemen.
Right, so you get people who, owe their living
to
the city or the county.
Yeah.
Right, and also you get populations that are far whiter.
Okay. When you say mixed, you're not talking about, when you say the neighborhoods are mixed, you're saying
mixed income and also mixed racially.
So
there's now a Latino presence where it used to be predominantly white or white ethnic, and now there's a little bit of both. So it's like the area where the Hispanic expansion has gone up to, but it stops right around Archer Heights. In fact, if you look at the poll stations, it's really weird because as you go down Archer, there's one poll site where the anti-Burke and pro-Burke vote are kind of like split at that point, and then from that point west, then it becomes very, very pro-Burke. So that's like the
So you're saying that Ed Burke was victorious because of voters split along racial or ethnic lines?
That's another fact. So factor one is gerrymandering. Factor two is you gerrymander because you want specific demographics in concentrated in certain areas, right? And so someone in the press did a colored, one of those colored maps of how Burke won, and essentially the highest turnout, because it was a very, very low voter turnout overall in the ward and in the city, the highest turnout, like 70% of the voter turnout, was that stretch in Garfield Ridge.
70%, did you say?
So like 60s, 70s compared to like 30s in Brighton Park.
So this is just literally people showing up to vote is what you're talking about. Okay.
So not only do you now have twice as many people coming out to vote in that small strip of area, but you have like 70-80% of that block voting for Burke.
Wow.
And so by being able to get his machine to do what they do year in, year out, he's able to churn out just enough votes to avoid the runoff.
All right. Now, when we come back, I'm going to bring my worlds together. We're going to ask a Trump question regarding Ed Burke, and that is this. Are the voters in the 14th Ward, that 70% segment that just voted for Ed Burke, are they as slavishly devoted and dedicated to Ed Burke as Republicans are to Donald John Trump, in that no evidence will ever get them to vote otherwise for other than voting for their man? We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times Online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader Online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show, J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show.
Hey, everybody, join the Chicago Sun-Times at one of our upcoming Hear Our Voice community forums and dive even deeper into Chicago politics. In conjunction with our partner AARP, these conversations are your chance to learn more about the future of our great city. We've even invited mayoral candidates Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle. Yes, indeed, Lori and Tony will be there to join us as active listeners, attending the forums to better understand. Well, if they
at the same time?
Well, they've been invited. I don't know if they're actually going to show up. Hey, come on, get over there, all right, you, Lori and Tony. They'll be attending the forums to better understand your opinions and hear your voices. And where are these forums? Good question. I'll now answer it. The first forum is Wednesday, March 13th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the DuSable Museum of African American History in Hyde Park. One more time, everybody. Wednesday, March 13th from 7 to 9 at the DuSable Museum of African American History in Hyde Park. I invite you to join this conversation with a great lineup of panelists, including Mary Mitchell and Mark Brown from the Sun-Times, Rosanna Marquez from AARP, and Maze Jackson from WVON 1690. The second forum is Monday, March 18th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Arturo Velasquez Institute in Pilsen, and features panelists Mark Brown and Carlo Ballesteros. Did I get that right?
Ballesteros, yep.
That's right. Adolfo helped me out there. And from the Sun-Times, Rosanna Marquez from AARP, and Fernando Diaz from the Chicago Reporter. Best of all, these events are free. You hear that, Dennis? Free. F-R-E-E. Free. They don't cost money. That's what that means.
You trying to tell me something?
Yeah. You can go. For sign-up details, go to thesuntimes.com. All right. That sounds like a great...
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed, we are live from the Sun-Times. Adolfo El Dragon Mondragon, the political strategist on the Southwest Side, is with us in the studio, along with Monroe Anderson hanging around. Monroe Monday, even though it's on a Tuesday, talking Trump. I'm now going to bring these two worlds together. I promised I would do it, and I'm going to do it now. Are the voters who voted for Ed Burke on the southwest side of the city of Chicago, even though he is under indictment right now for shaking down that Burger King franchisees, Adolfo and Monroe, are they as blindsided to the deficiencies of the man they love as Republican voters are for Donald John Trump? Adolfo.
All right. So I think that when you say blindsided, you mean loyal. I think they're both as loyal, but for different reasons. There's different dynamics at play. I think for Trump, it's a demographic in the white community that wants to feel like their problems can be blamed on somebody else. And they like the promise of a rich man telling them that they too somehow could become rich, right? Mm-hmm. I think with Burke, it's a matter of livelihood. It's people who work in the city, who work in the system. And I'll give you anecdotally some of the stuff that our poll watchers were hearing, because it was actually pretty friendly. We thought, there might be beefs or something like there usually is in a tight race, but everybody was pretty friendly. There might have been one or two issues, but so some of the stories people would get was some of these Burke poll watchers at the end of the day would say, listen to Jaime's people. You guys did a great job. We admire your guy. If it wasn't for the fact that we're doing this because our livelihood depends on this, if we lose this election, we don't work tomorrow. Maybe not literally tomorrow, but they lose their jobs. One poll watcher told me that that at the end of the day, when the tickets were coming out and they saw that they had their margin, they had a cooler set up already in the poll station with beer and everything. They went out there, they started yahooing, and they went out there at some other time, because for them, that was it. It was like do or die. They owe a lot to Burke, either they or their family, their fathers, their uncles, whatever. And I bet you they were reminded constantly about it. And so they owe allegiance because of these favors, jobs, whatever, little things that got done for them. And that's why they were out there. Whereas Trump's people is a completely different reason.
When I was press secretary, Dick Mell came into my office.
Alderman Dick Mell.
Yeah, Alderman Dick Mell, with a list. And he says to me, you tell Sawyer that either he hires our people on this list or we're going to run one of our guys against him and take him out of office. Sawyer didn't hire off the list. They took Sawyer out of office.
Well, first of all, let me just say, they were ready to take Sawyer out of office regardless. He could have hired every single person on that list. Yeah, and Dick Mell and Ed Burke would still have been. Yeah. And Daley was coming anyway back in 1989.
Right.
That's an interesting story. A little power politics there.
Yeah, exactly. So he's absolutely right about that. With Trump, it's a different situation. It's racial. Most of those Trump supporters are white men, uneducated, who feel that they're being left behind. They're becoming more insignificant than they were. And Trump empowers them, emboldens them, so they feel they're comfortable with their racist statements and their racist mentality. And it's what has, back in the days of slavery, you had these white guys who didn't have a pot and a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out of. But the thing is, this is cable, so I get to it. Yeah, right.
Welcome to podcasting, my friend.
Right. But these guys, the one thing they had was they weren't niggers.
Right.
So that made them superior. And so they were all right. And so it's that sort of mentality now among middle age and older age white men.
And even look at Tucker Carlson, right? There's more audio of him now, not only the misogynist stuff, but now the racial stuff. Right. It's the same thing. White guys, we created civilization. Why shouldn't we be proud to be white guys, Right. That BS.
Well,
that bullshit.
We're all just letting our freak flags fly. This is a podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We've been liberated from regular radio. By the way, I want to say that Adolfo has no longer, but for years had a real radio show, like on radio show. She couldn't have said that word.
Which is where we met, because you had one too.
Right, I had one right before you. Well, I was before you. But
I had a real TV show.
That's right. And you definitely wouldn't have said anything like you just said.
Right.
Now, one of the things that Donald Trump has also done, which is interesting, going back again to the Burke comparison, is that he has really demonized Hispanics in a way that I haven't seen done in the city of Chicago. in Chicago, it was like this racial fight that Monroe was alluding to when he's talking about Burke fighting Washington and Burke fighting Sawyer.
Right.
But Donald Trump has really demonized Hispanics, and this is interesting. Ed Burke, among his clients that he represented as a property tax attorney, was that Donald Trump, he got a tax break for the Trump Tower right here in the city.
Right.
You would figure that Hispanic voters in the 14th Ward would vote overwhelmingly against him, and yet that was not the case.
Right. No, it wasn't the case because so speaking of the area that was more Latino heavy voter base in Gage Park and Brighton Park and Archer Heights, even there, Burke kept the majority. He won about 50% or a little bit more of the vote.
Wow.
And poll watchers coming, that were working for the Guzman campaign and probably the ones for Patino's campaign could probably say, as Latinos were walking into those polls, they were like, "Nah, man, Burke's my guy because he takes care of my, of my alley, and he makes sure that the street lights are working, and so you still have that self-interest dynamic there that even makes it even out, all the bad stuff even out."
So this is an interesting new dynamic that first you talked about city employees who feel an obligation to vote for Burke because they're afraid that if he's defeated, they'll lose their job. Right. And now you're talking about ordinary Hispanic citizens who aren't working for the city, who somehow or other believe that Ed Burke is the reason their garbage gets collected, as opposed, like if Ed Burke were defeated, this is so Chicago, this mentality, Adolfo. If Ed Burke were defeated, city workers would no longer collect garbage.
Right. And to add to that, there's also a racism and class colorism issue there as well, because as you go farther west, you get more lily white in the neighborhoods, right? So if you're on the far east end in Brighton Park, that's where you see the murders and you see all the gang violence and stuff. So if you're a voter there, you're probably more apt to vote along the lines of a progressive Latino. But if you're in Archer Heights, you moved out of Brighton Park, you moved out of the back of the yards, you moved out of the ghetto, right? Mm-hmm. And so now you're like, no, I'm not going to go back to the way it used to be. Burke keeps my neighborhood running pretty well. I'm going to vote for the guy. So there's that dynamic as well.
Before we take our break and bring on our next guest, the immortal Mike Novak is in the studio. Before we do that, he's looking around like, I'm immortal now. I want a prediction from both Adolfo and Monroe, and that is this. Ed Burke has been successfully elected. We're about to have a mayoral runoff. So either Tony or Lori will be the new mayor. In your humble opinion, I want a prediction here. Will they keep Ed Burke with his position of prominence in the Chicago City Council, or will they treat him, like a pariah? Adolfo, your prediction.
Well, I think if it's Lori, because she's gone on the record that she would treat him like a pariah and try to force him out. I think that there would be some incentive to do that then and not look bad. I think if it's Tony, unfortunately, she's cozied up to the dailies before. She's cozied up to burials. She already has a relationship with Burke. I think that she would stymie out of doing something like that.
Monroe, prediction.
He's absolutely right. I agree with him 100%. Sawyer took Burke out as finance chair, and if memory serves me right, he put Tim Evans there. But anyway, Burke was not his finance chair. He took him out. So Burke has been removed, can be removed. He apparently is.
No, Harold Washington took him out. Burke was the finance committee chair, and then Harold seized control of the city council.
And Evans in, that's
yes.
right. And then, yeah, right, okay.
The things I remember.
Right, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. I just know Burke wasn't there. I've forgotten that Harold did it.
All right, that's Monroe Anderson, Adolfo Mondragon. Thanks so much for coming in, gentlemen. I know people have to move their cars before they get towed. We got Mike Novak ready to come on. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times Online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader Online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, The Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's C-O-R-P as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Benny J, take it away.
All right, will do. Monroe Anderson has left the building. Taking his place in the hot seat. Mike Novak, host of the Mike Novak Show. Isn't that interesting, D? The Mike Novak Show is called the Mike Novak Show.
How'd you come up with that name?
I had to work really hard at it, okay? And it just sort of came to me in a dream. It was weird. And you know, Ben, you and I have the honor of having been canned by the same radio station, okay?
It's a very enormous club that we're a very select club, Mike Novak.
Very select club.
Okay.
You know, and I have a further honor. I was canned from Ben's bowling team, so I've got the radio show and the bowling team.
Do tell.
All right.
Wait, you were on his team, not in the league. You were in.
Okay,
he invited me to come and bowl.
See, I never
one night.
He invited me to join another team in the league, but not his team.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't remember that, and I definitely don't remember this.
He does not remember. He does not remember inviting me to bowl, and I bowled. And I'll admit I did not bowl well that night, but I never got asked again. And that was
all right. Let's just explain something right here, right now. Before I'm on the current team, which includes Miles, our editor's father, and a dear friend of mine, Cap.
Oh, so that's
how
this works, Miles. Yeah. That's how you get in the room here.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
His dad, man, one of my best friends. All right. Anyway, so I had another team that a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, Mike. They never showed up. It's always you're supposed to have 5 guys show up. I was lucky if 3 showed up, and usually it was me and another guy. So finally, I said enough. Okay, so I was looking for any person I could find to show. I must have talked. Hey, Mike, can you breathe? Come on, my bowling team.
Exactly.
Did you actually bowl with us?
Yeah.
I do not remember this.
Yeah.
You must have been
bowled
terrible.
Now it's got to be like a dozen years ago. So
it was a long
while.
time ago. I've been on the current team for about we figured this out 15 years. So this was a while back.
Oh, so maybe longer.
Yes.
So Ben, I know you play basketball. You bowl. But did you guys, as journalists, were you in that softball league?
No. How did you know? When I first met this young man across the way from me, Mike Novak, he was like flowing long hair. He was like this hippie guy.
It still happens sometimes.
Yeah, it was in the 70s.
Dr. D knows that.
Yeah.
He's seen it.
Yes, I do.
And he was actually good in softball. I was terrible, but he could hit the
I met this
fields.
Yale alum one time. I never met him. A guy named Paul Sortel, some investment banker, but he played football at Yale in the 60s. But he said that he was a good friend of Cup and that he would play on this softball league that like only
No, I was not
I
part of
played
that.
on the media softball league
and that
for several
chosen
years.
few would
No,
like,
I definitely was not part of that team.
I still play softball. I play in the theater league, and I've played in the. You're not going to believe this. I've played in the theater league since 1980. All right.
Wow.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's
We're
a
talking
long
about
time.
16 inch Chicago.
Yeah, 16
Right.
inch. And I came
The
from,
only softball.
No, we used to play 12 inch.
We used to play 12 inch in
12
Evanston.
inch?
So
Yeah,
I
Evanston,
first moved here.
With mitts and gloves?
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
I've been pretending out there I was out.
I'll play
A-line.
either. I don't care. It's like, give me a glove, I'll go play 12. You know, without, I'll go play 16. It's fine with me.
Yeah, but
What
anyway.
are they doing downstate? What did they?
The game Washers. You guys ever play Washers?
No.
Man,
You
guys are so
toss them
clueless.
against a curb? Is that it?
Yeah, Washers. Just
Wait, they
like
don't play softball in the 618?
not really.
Oh.
Washers.
Yeah. It's so
Look it up,
anyway, that was many
everybody. Look
years
it
ago. Mike Novak, with great softball player.
And now I got to give the plug because I never do this. I go on shows or I go to do a talk, and then I never remember to plug myself in my own show. So I'm going to do it right now. Get it out of the way. 1590 WCGO. A lot of people don't go to the right end of the dial because that's not where all the talk stations are. All right, but this one is, and I'm on Sundays 9 to 11 talking the environment and gardening, green living, local food, sustainability. And as I was telling Miles outside, sustainability is one of those buzzwords you got to be careful about, like feminism and racism and all those things. Sustainability, you start saying that, and people, they pigeonhole you. They put you in a corner. So,
Well, what does sustainability mean?
I have no idea.
Okay, but you talk about it anyway.
I talk about it anyway.
Sustainability. What do you think it means, Adolfo? Sustainability. I have a sense of what it means, but I can't say for certain. It is such a buzzword.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it means I don't know. It has to do something with the global warming stuff plus some other.
I'll tell you what I think it means. It means using resources efficiently, using fewer resources than you think you need to use, and leaving things better than you found them.
Absolutely. So you don't consume too much. You don't destroy too much just to get through the day. Now,
which we're really famous for in America, by the way.
Like carbon footprint and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Okay.
All right, so let's make everything local. Let's bring it down local. We have a mayoral election coming up. Before we talk about the environmental stance of Tony Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot, if they even have any stance to speak of, what's your assessment of how the city has performed over the last 8 years or so in regards to the environment, Mike Novak?
Well, you know, you wouldn't have both of the candidates running on recycling, how they're going to fix the recycling service, if we weren't having problems there. You know, the problem is there are so many different areas when it comes to sustainability and the environment, especially in a major metropolitan area like Chicago. It can run the gamut. It runs from water, and we know we have problems with lead and lead pipes. How are we going to fund that? How are we going to pay for it? We have to. We have to fix that. Trees are a huge initiative. You know that under Richie Daley. And am I allowed to call him Richie the Deuce on this show?
You can call him whatever you want. We're on podcasting. You can say whatever you want.
That's right. I can swear at everything.
Well, we've already discovered that.
I heard that earlier.
I dabbled in it already.
But I talked to a tree guy in a very prominent tree company just last week, and he happened to talk to me. He doesn't live in the city, so he wanted my opinion, what was going on, and he mentioned something about trees, and you could hear him going, "Yeah, well, not much has happened in the last 8 years with that." And so,
what do you mean by that? I mean, they're not planting trees?
Well, there are initiatives. There's a Chicago Tree Initiative, and the idea is to partner with organizations like the Morton Arboretum and get more trees and increase the canopy, which is, you know, when they say canopy, it means basically the number of trees. And apparently it hasn't been as big on their radar of this administration as it was in the past administration. Okay, I mean, love them or hate them, the one thing Mr. Daley did like was trees. Yeah. He liked his green.
And wrought iron fencing, right?
And wrought iron.
Yes, he did.
Okay, now we're talking about 90s Daley. And Mike, I have this memory from the 90s. We, in my neighborhood on the north side, what was it? The Asian longhorn beetle. There was a beetle outbreak.
Asian longhorn beetle.
And
now it's emerald ash borer. Then it was Asian longhorn beetle.
Okay.
And it was Asian longhorn beetle was interesting because it was big, slow, and stupid. All right, and it was
as opposed to a beetle that's what smart.
No, as opposed to a beetle like the emerald ash borer, which is tiny and slippery and sneaky and can get in anything. The Asian longhorn beetle was big and it was really obvious, and so it was very easy. Well, I wouldn't say very easy because it has popped up again in certain parts of the country. But when you see it, you know what you got. And then you can go, okay, we can fix this. Then we had the emerald ash borer, and it just sneaked in, and suddenly we've lost billions of ash trees all over the country.
Okay, that's our country, but in Chicago in particular, we'll get to this outbreak you're talking about. In Chicago in the 90s, the Asian longhorn beetle infiltrated the north side of Chicago, and trees were dying.
Yes.
And Mayor Richard M. Daley, I'm now going to say something nice about Mayor Richard M. Daley, okay?
I'm recording.
Okay, there we go.
A man I never voted for, ever.
Flag the tape.
Took this personally. He's like, Mike Adolfo, it was as though he said, that beetle can't attack trees in my city. And he just started, they came in and they had to cut down the trees because that would just, you had to stop the infiltration of the beetle. But then he immediately started planting trees. I mean, it was like overnight they started planting trees. And so he has a reputation, in part because of that, definitely in the north side of Chicago, as Mr. Tree. And yet there are other instances.
Yeah, I can tell you a story because somebody I know worked in the department, the late great Department of the Environment, which might come back under, well, both of the mayoral candidates now say they're going to reinstate the Department of the Environment. And it's on their platform, which I was reading their platforms last night. And but Richie was quirky as well. I heard a story from somebody in that department who said one day Richie's driving down this street, and in Chicago they had planted a bunch of what are called Kentucky coffee trees. They're native trees. They're excellent city trees. They're tough, except when they're young, they look like popsicle sticks had been put in the ground, ugly popsicle sticks. And one day, apparently, the mayor was driving by and he said, What's those trees there? What's those trees there? And they said, oh, it's that. He says, I don't like them. Get rid of them. And I don't think they took them out, but I think they put them, they weren't on the favored list anymore because he went down the street and he caught them when they were young. And when they're young, they don't look that good. When they're mature, it's a gorgeous tree. Yeah. You just got to wait a little bit.
Yeah, he's not the most patient man in the world. Mike Novak is my guest. The man obviously knows more about trees and plants than anyone possible. Adolfo
Which is not true. I am not an arborist. I just play one on the radio.
Well, you know more than anyone in this room. Let's reduce it to that.
That's not so hard, okay? That's not difficult.
Adolfo Mondragon is taking around. We're going to be talking environment. He talked about how Mayor Rahm was the mayor who didn't tear down the trees, but he tore down the Department of Environment. Should we bring it back? We'll be right back.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. Music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
That's Dr. D on the piano, that little keyboard we have right behind Adolfo in the corner there. Yeah.
He's good on that piano.
He's really good.
I didn't realize you played, Dr. D.
Do what I can.
He does it all, man.
In between pitching whatever that washers and
right, now
Eddie
get
has an
ready
update for
chopsticks.
us. What's going on, young man?
All right, well, we're just going to go to the Facebook page here. A lot of people are weighing in. Yeah, this mayoral runoff election between Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle, boy, it's a heated one. Everybody's back and forth here. We talked earlier about the news. Ben, you mentioned it, how, what was it that Tony Preckwinkle, during her speech, she mentioned that Lori Lightfoot is a lesbian.
Oh, no, it was during the debate. It was say something nice about Lori Lightfoot. She could have said she's a brilliant lawyer. She could have said that she took a courageous stand in, standing up to Mayor Rahm and running against him. She could have said, but no, she said, I'm very, I'm impressed that you're so honest about being a lesbian. That's what she said.
All right, and shout out
calculated.
Shout out to our friend Julie. Julie, what's going on up top? You're awesome. All right, she says it's silly to think that Tony Preckwinkle was outing Lori Lightfoot. I also don't think the black people, including Black Christie, are as against LGBT plus community as much as it's talked about. Monroe Anderson and Sergio Mims often make blanket statements about us that I don't necessarily agree with. And then Julie also says, why would Tony's campaign accuse Wilson of trying to, quote, shake her down if it wasn't true?
Well, the first part of what she said, I agree with her. I've already had that debate with Monroe. I don't believe in any way that was effective tactic, a dog whistle. I agree with, was it Julie who wrote that? Yeah, I agree with you 100% there, Julie. I don't believe any vote was changed because Tony Preckwinkle made those comments, whether it was calculated or not. And so I don't believe any vote was changed. And I've been arguing this point forever since I had a radio show that I do not believe the black community makes its voting decisions based on a person's sexual preference. I've seen no evidence of that at all.
Oh, and we learned something earlier in the program. Audrey wanted to mention it as well about Mike Novak. Flowing long hair. Didn't know that, but not surprised. Mike Rapunzel Novak.
Yeah, he did, man. He was fast in those days. Young Mike Novak.
I was never
scrambling
fast.
around
We
the
Novaks
base
have never been fast, okay? It does not run in my family at all. But I'm not as slow as the Thompsons. That's an inside joke for you. Okay.
Paul Thompson of Clydesdale. Anyway.
I hope he's listening.
Yeah, I hope so, too. All right. Mike Novak, before we took the break, I was mentioning, you mentioned actually that Mayor Rahm in his infinite wisdom decided it was a good idea to dismantle the Department of Environment that the city had. What's your thoughts on that decision by Rahm?
Well, I think it was bad politics. You're a political show. I think what is happening now with both of the candidates saying that they would reinstate the department is good politics because people care about their environment. They really do. And I know you want to get into in a second some of the stereotypes about that in terms of the city. But I think everybody wants a green place to walk. They want clean air to breathe. They want clean water to drink. We're in a situation 30, 40 years down the road when we were told, it'd be a really good idea to recycle. People want to recycle. They don't know how. They certainly don't know how in the city of Chicago. And it's complicated as well by things like the National Sword. You know what the National Sword is? That's China's plan that they instituted at the beginning of last year, where they said, basically, we're not going to take your recycling anymore from around the planet because it's too dirty. We got enough environmental problems here, and we're going to stop. And what was our plan B? What was our backup plan? And I mean the United States and the rest of the world, they didn't have one. They still don't have one. They still don't know what to do with this stuff. So some of it isn't just Chicago, because we're not the only city in the country that can't recycle. In fact, there was a study recently did of the cities in Illinois. There's a bunch of them that they're not as bad as we are. By the way, I went online before I came in today. I went to the city of Chicago to look at the numbers, and we're at 8.81% in terms of recycling in Chicago.
That's terrible.
Okay. What's even worse is we stopped picking up yard waste. We did that before, and let's face it, it's organic material. Where does it go? It goes to the landfill. If it goes to the landfill, it turns into methane, which is a lot worse than carbon dioxide. We don't pick up any yard waste. A couple of years back when I was the president of Chicago Recycling Coalition for about 6 years, And several years ago, the city said, okay, and it's state law, by the way, state mandate, you can't put yard waste into a landfill. City of Chicago was not really paying much attention to it. They said, oh, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll do an opt-in. You call 311, we'll pick up your yard waste. Well, you want an institution, you want a program to fail, make it opt-in. That'll do it every time. Yeah. And so the numbers, and I went there today and I was stunned. For 2018, zeros all the way down the city in terms of, they picked up no yard waste last year.
So is that like a collective action problem or something, or what?
It is.
No one wants to be the first to opt in or something?
Yeah, why isn't anybody opting in?
Because they want it as a public service. They want it as a city service. They want it like the recycling, where every 2 weeks somebody's going to come by and pick up the yard waste. It'll be part of a program. When you tell them to opt in, well, they get around to it or they don't get around to it. They're not being encouraged by the city. Where have you seen the advertising for that? Where have you seen the education for that? So it's not happening. So this is where we've really fallen down on recycling. There's some things we do well, like construction and demolition. I think I talked to you about that when we had a chat not too long ago. Construction and demolition, we passed an ordinance. It's like above 60%. Some people say 75%. It's pretty high. And so that kind of skews the numbers because that's all by weight. But at least we're taking the demolition materials and we're repurposing them, and that's a good thing.
Now, here's something that's counterintuitive. Chicago, as I like to point out, is a liberal democratic city. And one of the tenets of the liberal Democratic Party is a belief in environmentalism, a belief in protecting the environment, a belief in promoting recycling. We've had nothing but Democratic mayors. Mayor Daley, as we just got finished talking about, really promoted himself as a lover of, well, at least trees. And yet...
And he did establish the Department of the Environment, which didn't exist.
He did establish the Department of Environment, and yet we're terrible at recycling. And during the Daley years, we had this cockamamie blue bag system. I don't know if anybody in here remembers this. I know Mike is old enough to remember this, but we had the... What did you...
Don't get me started,
okay,
all right?
So I don't understand why the mayor, most powerful man in the city of Chicago, supposedly loves the environment. Both of them. Rahm and Daley, if they wanted to, like that, they could establish a rigorous environmental recycling program that would be mandatory across the board, et cetera, et cetera. Yard waste would be recycled, et cetera. Why is...
And other organic materials like food scraps. We don't have anything for food scraps in this city. You go to San Francisco, they got a green cart. You can put your food scraps and your yard waste in a green cart.
So why is there not a vigorous effort by the leaders of the city of Chicago to promote recycling?
I'll tell you why.
Money.
Well, yeah. Richie Daley thought he could do it on the cheap with the blue bag. They thought they could get away with it. They thought that you could throw it all in this one plastic bag. You throw it in the back of the garbage truck. You smush it down. We'll pick it apart later, and we'll get the recyclable. I mean, yeah, you're laughing about it, and everybody did. Yeah. The only person who didn't laugh was Richie Daley, and it took 15 years to convince him it wasn't working.
Yeah. I don't even know if they actually convinced. Richie Daley was a very stubborn guy. I remember when the fight over cigarettes, this is a tangent. I don't know if you remember this one, Mike. Or Adolfo, you may have been in college when this went down. It was in the 90s. And the issue was secondhand smoke. And
I was on the board of the American Lung Association at the time.
Okay, well, then you the American Lung Association and many other organizations were trying to promote a ban on smoking inside. And Mayor Daley, someone got into Mayor Daley's head that this would destroy businesses in the city of Chicago. Some restaurateur said, if there's a ban, Rich.
They were saying that all over the world, all over the country, all over the world.
And yet Seattle, New York beat us to it, right? So
everybody beat us.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Daley,
yeah.
So finally Daley was pressured into adopting the ban, allowing it to pass, all right? But so he gave it like a 2-year, Mike Novak, 2 years. It's going to take 2 years to get this off the ground. Meanwhile, Blagojevich, I'm going to say something nice about Blagojevich. He passed a state law. It was like 6 months. Somehow or other, statewide, we could have a smoking ban. So I think on top of everything else, Mike Novak, Daley was stubborn. And
they all are. When you get to be mayor, you don't get to be mayor by being flexible, do you?
All right. Now, speaking of mayors, we have two candidates running for mayor, Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle. You studied their position papers on the environment. Mike Novak, is there much difference between the two of them?
I don't know that there's a lot difference in the environmental end of things. They both want to bring back the Department of the Environment. They're both concerned about lead in our water and how we're going to address that. The question is, what are their solutions for that? It's one thing to say, yeah, we got to get those lead pipes removed. How are you going to pay for that? And although it has to be done, it just has to be done. I will say that Lori Lightfoot, she starts with the Department of Environment and then takes all these issues and says, and then the Department of the Environment will, la. And it almost makes me think that she's putting too much on them. But again, I'm supporting Lori Lightfoot for other reasons. I'm glad that both of them are addressing the environment, which is good. Did you see any of that in the 2018 elections? Not really. There wasn't much of it, even though we're in the middle of climate change. We're heating up like bread in a toaster right now.
Okay, you draw a distinction. In 2018, I had Katie McFadden on my show so many times from the Sierra Club. There was a notion, just a general notion, that Donald Trump represented a rolling back of environmental regulations that we needed to protect ourselves from pollution, and that the Democrats, for better or for worse, in my opinion, better, represented a resistance to what Donald Trump was attempting to do. So if you voted, in the most general sense, if you voted Democratic, you were voting against Donald Trump's antediluvian environmental attitudes. I don't see that same general struggle taking place on the local level. Adolph, I'll put this to you. I don't see on a local level in races like for alderman, for mayor, treasurer, anything, like the issue of being a good steward to the environment.
Lincoln Yards. Just bring up Lincoln Yards and all, what it could have been and what it's going to be. It could have been open land. It could have been park. It could have been a natural area. It's going to be steel and concrete, and we're going to lose all those millions of dollars and billions.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a lack of on the ground, both people and organizations that are chiming in about the environment. In the Southwest alone, look, you have communities that were on the east end and the south and the west end in the shadows of two coal emitting plants, right, for many, many years. You also have communities that have very few parks, right? And so over the years, you've had activists chime in and talk about and try to make that an important issue. But you're right. At the election level, you never hear candidates talking about being good stewards.
And I wish they would.
And I wish
think
the
aldermen need to.
Because those are real issues that people care about, to the extent that there are organizations like in Little Village, there's that one with the big acronym, Little Village.
Environmental Justice Organization.
There you go. and so they've been out there for years, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not an important
issue. And they've been
issue.
very effective too.
Right. But the politicians themselves, and it's an issue, like you said, it's an easy issue to just, to take on and be pro advocate for, but I don't see it. I don't see it.
We are now in the bonus segment of the Ben Joravsky Show.
I was going to ask you about that, like Bill Maher, do we have overtime?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something about podcasting. You don't have to really worry about if you go overtime.
Wait a second, but isn't this sometime they're looking at the electricity bill? And
Not yet, at least.
Not yet.
At 5 cents a wattage hour, right, or something.
I was going to bring that up as well. They had the Chicago Tribune had an editorial board meeting between Preckwinkle and Lightfoot. You guys want to play some of the clips?
Well, as long as we have
time?
these two
Sure,
gentlemen in
this
here,
is
let's
great.
do it.
Let's do it.
All right, great. We'll have Mike Novak, you pick here. The first clip I have is the response on what the candidate will do in their first 100 days if elected mayor. Which one you want to hear first, Lightfoot or Preckwinkle?
Preckwinkle.
He's going Preckwinkle, ladies and gentlemen. Is that who you voting for? Sorry.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right, here we go. Let's hear the first 100 days, what Preckwinkle plans to do here. Hang tight with me here. All right, here we go.
I think every elected official in the state has to focus on growing our economy. That has to be a priority. And we also have to do that in a context of providing opportunity and equity for all of our residents. So I think it's really important that we make clear that the job of the mayor is to be sure that our city grows. We can't thrive unless we grow.
All right, so
can't thrive unless we grow. Well, you were just talking about that with Lincoln Yards. You would like to see a little less growth.
Well, what I would like to see, what I'd like to hear from the mayor, and I don't even know it's possible because I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, I'd like to hear one of these candidates come out and say, I don't care what the city council votes on now. We're going to slow that thing down somehow. I don't know. Because as a mayor, you have a lot of power. I mean, you can't undo the vote, but you might find ways to just slow the thing down.
Well, we're talking about the Lincoln Yards project.
Right, slow down permits, slow down a bunch of stuff. Right?
Exactly. You could make life very difficult, couldn't you?
Yeah. Actually, Lori Lightfoot at our Hideout show last Tuesday pretty much said as much, that even if the city council in its infinite wisdom rushes through Rahm's Lincoln Yards deal, if she's the mayor of the city of Chicago, she's not going to rush through to implement it. So as you're suggesting, Adolfo, there's things.
You not sit on it, but you slow it down.
Slow it down a little bit.
All right. This is a twofer here. I got Lightfoot on what she plans to do in her first 100 days.
If I'm fortunate enough to become the next mayor, that happens on April 2nd. The swearing in isn't until the middle of May. By that time, we will be in the midst of the summer violence season. So for me, if I'm fortunate enough to win that night, on April 2nd, that night I'm reaching out to Eddie Johnson and scheduling a meeting with his executive team for the next day to make sure that we have a true and robust plan to make sure that we're tackling violence and keeping people safe all over.
Adolfo, your thoughts on that response?
I like the fact that she's addressing an immediate issue like the violence issue ramping up during the summer, but I wish she would again not go towards the short-term problem but the long-term problems, right? And say no, during that month or whatever, I'm going to draw a plan on where we start planting the seeds to start eradicating this issue, in the long haul, not just the Band-Aid that we always put every summer or whatever. So.
Well, and you might say you could combine both of those responses, Adolfo. That's a really good point. And Tony Preckwinkle was saying we've got to look at the economy. And so what if you combine those responses and you said, in the first 100 days, I'm going to find 1,000 jobs.
Absolutely. Right.
For those kids and for those neighborhoods. I mean, and they both say they want other areas of the city to get more of the city's money, and I really applaud that. We've got to get out of downtown, our heads out of our downtown.
Well, one more time, the Lincoln Yards deal is $1.3 billion being dedicated to a gentrifying neighborhood in the north side of the city, while Adolfo's neck of the woods is starving for investment, the southwest side, the south side
For me, what encapsulates right now this mayoral election is, I grew up in the back of the yards, which has historically just been a very bad neighborhood in terms of everything, right? But anyway, we moved out of there just a few neighborhoods away to Brighton Park in '86. My family has lived there since we got there. When I first got there, it was like living in a suburb, okay? Just 10 minutes away from back of the yards. But in the past 30 years, instead of staying the same or getting better, the neighborhood has gotten worse. And people like me have lived there their entire life, didn't leave and go somewhere else. So for me, that's the story of Chicago for me. The last 30 years of my 44 years have been living in a neighborhood that I've just seen go downhill.
That's Adolfo Mondragon. Right. We got time for one more, D?
Yeah, let's do two more real quick. Another thing Lightfoot said that she's going to make sure happens if she's elected, she's going to have more aldermanic prerogative.
Number one, we have to get rid of aldermanic prerogative. I think, frankly, that's a line of demarcation between me and President Preckwinkle. If you look at, as you have, the number of aldermen that have been prosecuted and found liable for federal crimes over the years, 30 plus, the common thread that weaves among all of them is doing something in the exercise of aldermanic prerogative or privilege that is a shakedown and is a problem. The corruption in our city continues to be real. One of the biggest issues is aldermanic prerogative, and it's not the things that we know. So if you look at, for example, the Ed Burke criminal complaint. There's a lot of things there that really speak to this issue. But what we also don't know and don't see is literally probably the tens of thousands, if not millions, of interactions that aldermen have every single day with average citizens, where they've got to go to the alderman and kiss the ring and give more to get access to basic city services. That is a corrosive and corrupting influence that we have to fundamentally change.
All right. So actually, she was saying, we misspoke at the top. She was saying less aldermanic prerogative. She was going to get rid of aldermanic prerogative. No problem there. I'm going to throw this out. I have always felt that this was sort of a phony issue in the Chicago, the way it's been used. The reality is that aldermen get to handle the little things in their ward, quote unquote, and that's in quotes, and they do have a control, particularly we were just talking about in the 14th ward. It is absolutely true. But if you do not give the alderman the power, more likely you're going to give it to the mayor. And so the problem in the city of Chicago, and by the way, the mayors do not give aldermen a prerogative if they disagree what the aldermen are doing, as we saw with Brendan Riley and the Children's Museum downtown, where they threw aldermen a prerogative out the window. The point is, in the city of Chicago, if there's no honest oversight process, where there's no powerful being a mayor alderman, it's just, that's the real issue. Do you agree with me, Adolfo?
Right. So who puts the check on the alderman, right? So then you're going to have to come up with some kind of hybrid then, right? Where if you don't want to get rid of that aldermanic prerogative, then you have to be able to put the community as an extra check on the alderman itself to keep them honest. Because look, you already pay them tons of money, and that's not keeping them honest. You're giving them this prerogative because that's basically what they get for giving a strong mayor power, so they could feel good and they could feel like they're kings of their little fiefdom, right? So if these things are not subsiding the greed, then you're going to have to put in some other check, right?
How about a little thing called democracy?
What's that called?
I don't know. But you're, yeah, and again, getting back to the Lincoln Yards thing, you've got one alderman. I asked David Orr about this, and he was just shaking his head about aldermanic privilege and how we got to scale it back. But as you point out, if you take that away, then it goes back to the mayor. But my argument would be it's already the mayor. These powerful, and I'm using air quotes here, folks, aldermen don't get to do anything without the mayor's blessing.
That's the point.
So how do we get a more representative council government in the city of Chicago?
Yeah.
That's the question.
All right. We'll play one more clip here. It's Tony Preckwinkle talking about schools.
When people came to talk to me about moving into the 4th Ward, they said, are the streets safe and are the schools good? And I always talk about the importance of having great neighborhood public schools. And in order to do that, we have to be sure that our schools are well resourced.
And it pains me to say it, shout out to the Chicago Tribune for the
Thanks, Tribune. That hurts. Oh, that hurts saying that. Anyway, it's a standard line from Tony Preckwinkle talking about the importance of neighborhood school. I think we all agree on that point, right?
Absolutely. In fact, most people would say that, who is that famous... was it Murdahl, the one who said that the key to breaking the cycle of poverty was education?
Yes.
Right? So this is back from the 40s and 50s or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think everybody agrees education. But the sorry thing is that we've taken, for every little step that we move forward, we've taken steps backwards.
Yes, and to the point that Mike was making, if you really care about the Chicago public schools, maybe you would fund them more, and maybe that means you can't build Lincoln Yards with $1.3 billion, half of which comes from the public schools.
How do you respect the schools in the neighborhoods? But you do by giving them more money, giving them more resources. And if all the resources, as you say, are going to Lincoln Yards, well then.
All right, very good. We have run out of time, even for a podcast. And
how does that happen?
I don't know how that happens. I want to thank our guests, Monroe Anderson, the great Monroe Anderson, Adolfo El Dragon, Mike Novak, host of the Mike Novak Show, WCGO 1590, every Sunday at
9 to 11.
And
when are you going to come and join us up there?
Well,
I want you on the air right after my show. Okay, 2 hours of Ben Joravsky, right after 2 hours of Mike Novak. That would be the best thing ever. And I know it makes your keepers here nervous when I say things like that.
It is in my hometown of Evanston, so that's easy.
There you go.
I want to thank Miles Porter, doing a great job as he always does. announce tomorrow's guest. Amara Enya will be in the studio. Along with Maria Haddon, who was just elected alderman of the 49th Ward. So that's a great show for tomorrow. And finally, I could not leave this studio without giving a major shout-out to the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois, spinning behind that little board of his. Yes, he went to radio school, folks. The Dr. Dennis. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith workers, Local 126 and District 8, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Thank you once again to those unions for jumping on board with us here on this. And, of course, today's show is brought to you by our dear friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor.